All right, let's see. Good morning, you guys. I am working to get the recording back. I don't know that it is, but that's okay. We'll just go with that. And hopefully that you can hear me this morning. Good morning, you guys.
Good morning. I can hear you.
Good morning. Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
And my son's 31st birthday.
Oh, is it? That's
yes.
Awesome. Happy birthday to your son, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very good. I see Janet up in the corner, I believe. I can see mostly a ceiling fan. And I want to start. I've got us on Facebook Live, and I wanted to get started with a Martin Luther King quote. And the one that I chose today is, "Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase." And I liked that because I think a lot of times it applies to those in real estate. They get a leap of faith in doing this real estate business. And I love that you guys are joining me through this journey of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, because we can set up those stairs, right? This is a way for us to not be blindsided by what's happening in the market, that we can set up our models and kind of build that staircase, if you will, and at least getting into action. So I believe that you do have to have faith and not fear as you journey through your business. And I love that quote. So I don't know if you guys have a favorite quote that you would like to share, but you certainly are welcome to. So let's get started. We were on the Millionaire Real Estate Agent economic model on pages 175. And I had given you guys the page numbers to go through, I believe 192, that includes the lead generation model. Because I believe like in this section, we can maybe go through a few more pages together, because we've already gone through just the Millionaire Real Estate Agent models. And those are the economic model, the lead generation model, the budget model, and the organization model, giving us an overview of what those are as real estate agents have applied them to their business. So I wanted to, because we are talking about business, this section really gives us the numbers and the issues and what's going on with someone wanting to scale their business to become a millionaire real estate agent in the book. So, and the numbers that go with that and what you have to hit. And I found this model here. You may remember the leads, listing, leverage triangle, but also the stages of the growth there. And we talked about how we think, and how does a millionaire real estate agent or someone achieving high success think, and why they start with that. Then we talked about earning, and we went through the 4 models. And now it's time to talk about netting $1 million. So the strategies and the numbers to go along with that. And of course, you can see that all of these things are surrounded by this circle of your value proposition, what your database is like, and your service plan to take care of your customer service piece in business. It all goes together in one model. And the foundation of all of that is on leads. So there's going to be some things in this section that you notice were the same. And then there was a few extra commentary. So I wanted to start with, what are the common 4 disciplines of business, since we're talking about building a big business. The first one is management, and that's organization and coordination of the activities of your business. And then the second is marketing, the business process and creating relationships with and satisfying customers. The third is information technology, so using tech systems or pieces to store, retrieve, transmit, and manipulate the data of your business. And then the fourth is finance, and that would be a profit and loss, or what you hear us call a P&L. And that is not really complicated. It's just really business revenue coming in, what went out and how much do you have left? That's really all that a P&L is. And just like a budget at your house, you're going to want to know what that looks like and do that at least on a monthly basis. So that's the fourth piece, holding your expenses accountable. And we've talked about some of that. And the good news is all these models answers these questions. The information technology piece, of course, is your electronic piece like Command or Boomtown or whatever, Follow Up Boss, whatever it is you're using to control and manage the data of your business. So those are your 4 disciplines of being a business owner. So I'm going to just open up with this section on the beginning at 175. This section answers the questions of how to plan your business to scale it, the foundational models, and other income opportunities from that. And as we get started on page 175, I just wanted to see if any of you from going through these sections and these pages have any leading ahas or commentary around this section of the book. No, okay, that's fine. Just wanted to check because I like to talk, right? So I'm trying to give you give a pause. If you need to talk, raise your hand, speak out. All right, so the 4 models are repeated in this section. And at the millionaire level, there's a difference not in the models are the same, but it's the issues and the numbers that you will need to fully execute them. So you still go with the fundamentals. And I notice that there is the basic snapshot is the cash flow of the business and what that looks like. There are 4 elements to the economic model of a millionaire real estate agent, and that is gross commission income, or GCI, how much you brought in, what your cost of sales look like, which is a little bit different than an individual agent just coming in, starting a business, and operating expenses, or all the expenses that you have, and then net income. So for the purposes of this section, it's assuming, because it has to assume, right? We know we don't set commission. So you notice that it talks about the numbers is 3% or 6% sale with you getting one side of the transaction. And we always do that with our economic model. We put a base point of whatever our average commission might be. When you do these exercises, your average commission might be something different depending on the types of property that you sell, or just in general, what your average is. I think the average of the office happens to be between 2.75 or 2.85, just because with all of us together, there are some things that happened that were a lesser commission and some things that were more, right? So you might want to use that number. But it also, is just a simple rule for here. So now this section, when we talk about the economic model and the bigger picture, you may have heard someone in Keller Williams, you may have heard Jay or myself say a 30-30-40, or if you came to the business planning clinic, he talked about that. And that's just like a benchmark number for where your cost of sales, your operating expenses, and your net income target rates would be on a best practice of doing your business. So keep that in mind. Now, cost of sale, we talked about that when we talked about the economic model earlier, and how the cost of sale is affected with someone who's scaling their business to a bigger business would be because they are paying others as leverage pieces to get to those numbers that they're hitting. And cost of sale here not only includes what they pay the company, but usually there's going to be a listing specialist or a buyer specialist that are helping them get to the numbers of units that they need to hit the numbers they have to hit within scaling their business. So they're going to pay a listing specialist, typically a salary, and they're going to split their commission with a buyer specialist. Best practice is 50-50. Now, there may be businesses out there that aren't following this model exactly, and what they do with listing specialists and what they split with buyer specialists. Remember, it's your business. This book is to give you a roadmap or a best practice. So it says on here that a talented listing specialist will probably cost you hiring someone to go out and take listings anywhere from 65 to 100,000. Now, this book was written a while back, and that may be more, right? So you may, if you're thinking of scaling your business to get to those unit numbers and volume numbers, you may want to sit down and chat with some of those around you in our four walls that already run big businesses like Wendy Dixon or Jim Lee and the Monique Lee, the Lee team, or Team Tim West, or maybe even Lori Monteith, who have grown and scaled their business. So that could be an opportunity for you to do that. So I highlighted if your value proposition to your staff is such that you can compensate at a lower rate and still recruit and retain talent, then you as a business owner are in a much better place to make a higher income, because it makes sense, right? If you keep your costs low, then your net income is going to be higher. So you definitely want to pay talent, right? And you could probably find the win-win there as you search for the right person. So the business variables to having some of these pieces I wrote down are the local market, the average price, the support provided, the lead sources that you have, and the local employment conditions on getting those pieces in your business for cost of sale. But you are going to have to take money and pay out for that. So that's why cost of sale is so much larger for the millionaire real estate agent trying to scale their business and have those people helping them. So it's watching your net income, because a lot of times when someone's growing a big team, they want to be able to have that big life, that big business, but they also want to have a life. So they're constantly having to look at these things to make sure that they're actually making a profit, because that's what we got in business to do. So they have to put their business hats on when they think through in those 4 disciplines of business. So the next thing that the millionaire real estate agent has is their operating expenses. So that's all of the other cost of doing business, and they're going to have a pretty big operating expense with the number of people that are working with them and getting to scale their business. And so that's going to include marketing, rent, salaries, equipment and supplies, and advertising. Now you notice that there was a salary in the cost of sale for a listing specialist, right? Because that's how much it costs for you to do that sale. So there's a difference between a salary that's an operating expense and a salary that's up here in cost of sale. And I didn't know if that was a little bit confusing. I've heard people say, well, I don't understand why that's there that way, but it's because the salary is associated and it costs you that to hire that listing specialist leverage to go out and get that sale. So that's the difference. And the salary that's in the operating expenses is going to be someone that's working for you doing marketing. Maybe it's a transaction coordinator. Those are things that are services, but you're not, it's not a cost of sale. Does that make sense to you guys?
Nope.
No.
Sally, my understanding is that if it's a salary, it goes in operating expenses, period. That the cost of sales only includes like buyer's agents, because it's variable based on your income. I mean, if you think of cost of sales in manufacturing terms, it's cost of labor and materials that go into making a product.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard 2 different approaches as far as transaction coordinators, because, I use a transaction coordinator on an as needed basis.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put that in my own books in cost of sales. But some people say, well, if you were to have a full-time staff person doing that instead, that would be a salary. So some people put that in salary. So it's not cut and dried, I guess, is what I want to say.
Yeah, well, I think that, thank you for bringing that up, Janet. I really appreciate that. So let me ask this. What did James Farron say? I know that you were in business planning clinic, right? And I think Adrian was, and Polani, and maybe Clarice. What did James say about that? Because I can see where, and remember, we're all independent contractors. I guess bottom line is, what gets you out of trouble with the IRS first and foremost, as you go through that. And there may be that difference of that contract work with having a transaction coordinator that's outside of working with you or through you. And I believe that they're just trying to get you to understand that when you categorize it as a cost of sale, that it costs you because you're having that person do the sales part of your business. And I know probably a great person to ask around that would probably be Rachel Bruner too. And I'm not sure if she would be privy to how that was run. I know that before she was here, she worked on a team and she was a listing specialist. And that's what she did. She took listings. So I bet if you lined up 5 or 6 people that were running large teams, you would probably find a lot of differences in how they're handling those pieces. I think for this exercise as well is that maybe we leave it to the accountants to put it where they need to put it when you file your taxes or do the thing, but notice that you have to count it somewhere in your business to know if you're making money, right? So I think that when you look at it, whether you have decided that it's cost of sale or operating expense, you have to include it somewhere and remember it, because referrals are the same way. A referral fee is going to be a cost of sale because it costs you money to pay that commission out for that person. So operating expenses will impact the income that goes that you take home with you, obviously, and running that budget model will also help you to know if you're and holding your expenses accountable. So I think it's when you start scaling your business, you really have to watch all of those pieces very closely, because as you're busy and you've got a big team humming and running, you're going to, you may start spending money and not realizing it. It's just kind of like all those subscriptions that you might have signed up for that at the end of the year, you're like, where'd my money go? Why am I spending this on this and this and this? You have to hold your dollars accountable. So the net income for someone that wants to scale that big business is just how much money your business is earning. And so when you follow the Millionaire Real Estate Agent goals, it says on the bottom of the page, it pulls you through the smaller goals, and your net income goal will be set at $1 million. So that sometimes will make people go, right? Because it's a big number. And like we learned before, the big model and the big goal will pull you through the small ones, right? So this math is here so you can shoot for the stars, so to speak. So you're going to always work backwards from the net income that you want to earn. That's why they've said, okay, we want to earn $1 million. How do we stack the things on top? Just like you learned in a smaller scale over in the economic model in the previous pages. So I did not go through, because there's a lot of numbers, and I know I did different numbers earlier from Business Planning Clinic, because this book has had some changes, MREA number 2, right? On 177, it just talks about doing the math, and they've used that 30-30-40 rule. When you see figure 29 there, when they talk about you need to do $2 million in gross commission income to net that million, and that's giving those ranges for operating expenses and cost of sale. That cost of sale that they've got, that 700, the new MREA says 750, okay? And then the GCI is a little bit higher, but that accounts for the money that you're going to pay the listing specialist and the 50-50 split with a buyer specialist. That's where that number's coming from, because it's a big number. So on the middle of the page, it says when you're talking about doing the math, the 2 primary sources of income driving your gross commission income is seller listings and buyer sales. And we know that that's that 50-50 business, and that you should get buyer leads from those seller listings. So you want to focus all of your attention on wooing and winning sellers. Seller listings will be the greatest opportunity for your net income to hit that $1 million point. And I think that's true with whatever number you're shooting for. Those are the benchmarks that you want to put in place with that 20-lane highway, so to speak. So it says a seller listing properly marketed should generate at least 1 buyer sold if the leads are properly captured, followed up, and converted. So that there's an if there, right? There's an if. If your leads are properly captured from the buyers, followed up with, and converted. So top agents that he worked with writing this book confirmed that that was a big focus on what happened to the leads when they came in. Do you guys have a way to keep up with when you capture a lead, wherever it comes from? Do you have a plan of what you do with that? Do you have a system? Oh, I got a new lead today. How do I make sure that I don't let that one fall through the cracks. I think that's a struggle, for me included, to make sure that every day we do the same things to make sure we take care of those leads. Do any of you have a system for that? Janet?
Yeah, I throw them into an 8x8. And
Okay.
I've got 3 different versions depending on whether I know their home address, their email. If I don't have a phone number, that makes it really hard.
Yes, you
But,
can get part of
sometimes, especially the online leads, you don't necessarily get a legitimate phone number or email.
But you just put them in the best you can to see what
Mhm.
happens with that. And that's the system, because the system will do its best to make magic out of what you've got. And then you
Right.
can like, we have the magic going on.
Yeah, the hard part is some of that has to be phone calls. Then you got to remember to make those calls. So you got to look at your to-do list in Command or whatever you're using.
Yeah, the tickler file. Some people even use, and to me, this would be a lot if they've used their calendar to put tasks in there, especially at this point, if you're scaling this large, that's not going to work. You have to really have the models built to support the bigness, right? So you have to prepare to think like the Millionaire Real Estate Agent business with the numbers and how to run that, not build it later. So you build it first to have the big numbers, and so that the follow-up system will take you through to the big goal, right? So it sounds like you're doing what you need to do to make things happen with what you've got. And definitely there's a time where you go back and look at the gaps and see how can you get those extra pieces. And sometimes it's a mofer for the phone number. I've had a lot in my database that won't have phone numbers, having to figure out the marketing strategy to get them to get me the phone number. So if you have any strategies on this mastermind around your best way to get the phone number, please put it in the chat or online, put it in our comments so we can help each other out with some information. So focusing on seller listing income is the most important part of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent economic model. So on page 178, there's a model at the bottom, and you'll see where they came up with the 700,000, and now it's 750. And that's with paying a listing specialist and paying part of your commission out to a buyer specialist. Remember, you've already got administrative help running if you choose to follow this model. And you are going to see how the average sales price affects the units. Now, you may have heard Jay say, focus on the units, not the volume, right? Because in a market where the sales prices are going higher, a lot of times we've got this big GCI, and we've got, a lot of volume, but maybe less units than we've had before in previous years. So we want to hit the unit goal, but changing or the price point will affect how many units you need, obviously. And I have heard agents in the past be strategic about finding people in the database that are surrounded with others that maybe have the money that they have to spend. So if you wanted to raise your price point to 750,000, you find the people that you should be connecting with that have that kind of money to buy that type of house, because they're going to have a sphere that matches them. We surround ourselves with people that are like us, right? So one strategy is to get into conversations with people that might be buying different price points and ask for referrals and get into their world. And that's something that you can build on and focus on, because if we focus on it, it'll expand. So you can see on page 179, if the goal is 2.4 million in GCI and what the average sales prices were, down at the bottom, that's our average. That's about around closer to what our average is now, right? And this book was written a little bit ago, but the concept is the same. So you can see how that changes how many you need to close based on the average sales price. You don't have to work harder, right? You can get to the number faster. So in this, in the calculations here, it's saying that you would need 320 closed sales if they were $250,000 each at 3% commission to hit that 2.4 million in GCI. And that's a big number right there, right? So how are you setting up your big models to go and stretch yourself to get to that? Any comments about any of this part of the book that you guys read? Yes, Janet.
Well, it occurs to me that more and more agents are offering the buyer's agent only 2.5%. And I think a lot of listing agents must be also lowering their commission and giving it a 50-50. I don't know that for a fact because you don't see that side of the equation. But that really cuts into the amount that the prices have gone up. So prices up 16%, commissions down 16% is a wash.
Well, there are some agents that are, when they're listing, they're keeping 3.5% for themselves and giving the buyer's agent 2.5%.
Yeah, I realize that too. It's just that you don't know because you can't see it.
You can't, but remember, you are, and you know, there is a lot of different, because we're independent contractors, so people run their businesses differently. This book is telling you to watch what your bottom line is, and maybe maybe that is them changing their strategy because they haven't worked on some closing skills, or maybe it's conversion issues. And at the same time, when you change those pieces, like the listing agent that takes more on their side than giving, it doesn't foster good working relationships, but at the same time, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, on the black and white.
I've done that. I've taken 4 and given 3. So
yeah, I mean, it's not in anywhere that says that we should take them out and tar and feather them. It really is their choice to do that. But when the other side closes and they see that, sometimes it feels yucky. But at the same time, it may be a strategy for them to have more net income, right? They may have looked at, how can I, in this market, take more money home than I used to? So they get to decide if it's going to cause them networking relationship problems. But at the end of the day, they post that out there on the MLS. And I know I've been in your shoes, so I totally get the buyer's agent side of that. But it is their strategy to watch their net income. And, you know, so there's a lot of pieces to it. How much is the sales price? What's the commission, and the commission you negotiated with the seller? And, you know, could you get more commission, you know, as you go out and you chat with people? So the difference in the marketing strategies around commission always change and ebb and flow with what market we're in.
Yeah,
Always.
I'm just saying you have to consider that when you're putting together your numbers and how many units it's going to require.
Yes,
and also don't forget, you can talk with your buyer, and you don't have to take 2.5%.
That is true. So that is a conversation, and I do think that in the big picture, I would never, first of all, make it an issue between agents or customers about the commission. And I believe that conversation at your buyer's consultation is the best place to have that. The best place, because you want to set that expectation up at the front, not later on when you're faced with, this one's not going to play out the way I thought.
It's a similar conversation.
It's a business conversation for sure, that the more education you could do on the front end with buyers and sellers, the better experience, and the expectation is set, so they don't feel it just doesn't feel good to talk about it later. So I think it's an excellent thing to have a conversation about with buyers when you go through that buyer's representation form, and we should have that conversation.
It's a similar conversation to what you have on the for sale by owner.
Absolutely.
Aspect.
So one thing that on page 180, that leveling up in business and scaling those models, that a millionaire real estate agent would do is they would track everything. So they're tracking all these things, just like you're talking about. I know, you know, there's some sales that are going to have different percentages. What's my conversion rate? I've talked to this many people, but I didn't get this many appointments. What am I saying? They look at all of the ways their money is being spent, and if they're getting a return on their investment. So all of these numbers, they're constantly tracking and looking at to concentrate on getting those closed sales. So they concentrate on those key activities. And those key activities would be, you know, how many contacts they're making, how many appointments they're having, how many appointments they converted to either a listing agreement or a buyer's agreement, how many of those went to closing to get to the number, and they use those averages. So you'll see the only way to get to the numbers is to track your lead generation efforts carefully and get a firm grasp on your conversion rates. And so it's focused on that. And conversion rates may vary depending on a number of factors, including the current market conditions, the effectiveness of your presentation, the quality of the leads that you're getting, the consistency of your follow-up, and the extensive research and experience that can guide you to some solid benchmarks by tracking those things. So anyone love doing that? No, I don't. But you might think, you might spend your extra time in spreadsheets. However, you can also have someone do this for you. As you have grown that business to that scale, that could be someone that you're having a weekly stand up with, talking about where are we, what's happened, how many people have we talked to, what's going on, and what are the market conditions. So on page 181, there is their triangle here with how to work backwards from that $1 million net to get to how many sales that you need. And they've got conversion rates on here. Now their bubbles have 65 and 80% on the buy side and 80% and 65% conversion rates. I've written in pencil on mine 75 because I've noticed that in the business planning clinics that we've been attending, those are benchmark numbers there for putting in conversion rates if you don't know yours. So you can use conversion rates that aren't necessarily yours. As you track and figure yours out, those numbers will look better and you'll see where you are in the landscape. And I think that's a good model to follow. And on page 183, you'll see it broken down even further as to how to get to that, how many appointments that you need. So one thing I wrote on the top of page 182 is you will need to set annual, monthly, and weekly goals for buyer appointments and seller appointments, listing appointments. And that's really kind of like having a 411. You guys may have heard that report called the 411. It's what's your yearly goal? How do you chunk that down 1 month at a time? Like if you did this in January, would it get you 1/12 closer to the yearly goal? And then that month, you look at it every week to see if you're doing the key activities. It's a hyper focus. And that's one way that you could look at, following the annual, monthly, and weekly goals for your business for getting those appointments. Because when you don't, and you live very entrepreneurially and not purposefully, then you're going to be behind the 8 ball sometimes. You might naturally hit it, but you're not really being intentional. Who on here, if you're willing to share, looks at their appointment goals on a weekly basis? I can tell you do, Janet? Okay.
My coach makes me.
Okay, I love that. I have a coach as well. So when you do have some of those things, then we get back into our natural habits, and all of these things are just habits. And at first, habits feel weird when you're putting them in place. They're uncomfortable. As you do them over and over and over, when you stop doing them, it feels weird too. It's like something's wrong or something's off. I'm not quite sure. I'm on vacation. Why do I feel weird? It's because you're used to a habit of activities in your business. And when you're not doing them, it feels odd. So it's easy to get into the great habit, and it's also easy to go back to the other habit of not doing something. So we need people around us constantly talking about it. And I think that 411 is something that is my goal to use this year at a higher level, is really powerful for you to pinpoint what you're doing. And Millionaire Real Estate Agent businesses do it. They look every week at how many appointments they're having, and they look at what leads are coming in. So I noticed in the bottom of page 182, Sherry Wilson, Millionaire Real Estate Agent from Purcellville, Virginia, with a sales volume of 102 million, says converting calls into appointments is one of the most important things for me to do. That's their big rock. So when we know that all this is us to model our habits and how are we running our business to run our business at a high level. Guys, I can't believe it's 9:07. Is that right? Y'all said I'd usually pay attention to that, and I have not. And I apologize. You're 7 minutes off of your schedule. So please forgive me for that. And we will pick up on page 184 next week, if that's okay with you, and power through page 192. Is that good?
That's good.
That's good. Y'all are so sweet to me. I am so sorry it's 9:07. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you for hanging out with me. And I have a little nugget I will send to you, okay? Even if you got it on Facebook land, all right? Your lead generation model worksheet. All right, have a great day.
Thank you, Sally.
Welcome.